Hello, this is Dylan Moore with iRead It TV coming to you today. It is Wednesday, June 29th, 2022, and I have Mark Herr from the Center for Self-Governance on with us today. I am super excited because I'm always talking about how much I love classes from the Center for Self-Governance, and we're going to hear straight from him today, and we're going to be talking about the thing, well, I guess one of the things is on everybody's lips right now, which is the overturning of Roe versus Wade, and viewing this from the lens of systematic politics, because I think what you're about to hear from Mark isn't necessarily what you're hearing from everybody else right now. I guess there's one big horde just jumping up and down screaming, and they're not getting anything coherent. We're not getting anything coherent from them. That's what a lot of people are hearing right now. So hopefully what we're about to discuss today is significantly different from that. So, Mark, first of all, thanks for taking the time to come on the show.
Dylan, love to hang out with you and talk about all the things political, whether it's systematic or partisan or whatever.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me on.
So Roe versus Wade gets overturned. It's been the law essentially for the last 50 years. What are the immediate major implications that you're seeing from, again, the systematic politics standpoint?
Well, first of all is how the media portrays it as law. The Supreme Court doesn't create law; they write opinions.
Mm-hmm.
Their job is to interpret the law, which is created by the Congress. So, just in terms of formality, Roe v. Wade is an opinion, and it helped guide the behavior of states and the federal government when it came to this issue of abortion. So what happened in this last week regarding the so-called overturning of Roe v. Wade is they weren't overturning law. They're overturning a Supreme Court opinion from the 1970s. So Congress never passed a law regarding abortion. The Supreme Court made a ruling in 73 regarding abortion. And then this year, 2022, 50 years later, the Supreme Court made a ruling overturning the previous decision. So what does that mean? It literally comes down to this. Roe v. Wade said, hey, the federal government will, all 50 states must apply this decision equally. Well, this ruling on last week, what it does is says is each state can apply the ruling individually. So it comes down to, is it the federal government that's making the decision and it governs everybody within the federal system? So all 50 states have to apply it equally? Or can each state make the decision regarding that particular issue, in this case, abortion, independently, individually as individual states? And that's what this ruling did last week. It allows each state to independently, individually determine what they're going to do regarding this particular issue concerning abortion.
So the first thing that comes to my mind, again, when we're looking at this from systematic politics, which is essentially saying, are we following the traditional boundaries or not? Right? And from what my understanding, how the Roe v. Wade opinion was even opined to begin with was something to do with like inserting a right that wasn't really there into the 14th Amendment and then extrapolating from that, which means the federal government has the authority to say that or to rule over this issue. And that ostensibly, I would argue, is a move in the wrong direction of where the boundaries were traditionally at. Now, the overturning of this opinion, the overturning of Roe versus Wade, puts those boundaries back the way that they were before. So it looks to me like, I mean, regardless of whether or not abortion is good or bad, it's a win for systematic politics. It's a win for our side from the view of systematic politics.
That's right. It depends. It really brings to the forefront what do you want? Do you want a national government telling everybody what to do, or do you want independent states where you live deciding for themselves? That's kind of the crux. And so the original system, what you're describing, the original system, each of the individual states would make their decision on that particular issue, whatever it was. Now, the argument here is that slavery was bad, and so what should apply to all states is you should not have slavery, right?
Which they made a constitutional amendment for that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
There's a constitutional amendment for that. That changes the boundary and takes away that particular thing from the individual states of deciding. And that's one of the reasons why South Carolina wanted to withdraw from the Union in 1852, because they wanted to make decisions about slavery on their own. And so this brings this right to this issue. Abortion, is it a right? Is it a constitutional right? Was there a law by Congress? That kind of, all those questions come into play. And so the argument is that not allowing a woman to have an abortion is like taking away their individual right, kind of like slavery was taking away a right of a black person or whoever was a slave back then, whatever color skin they were. You know what I mean? Was that a right or a wrong thing? And should that be a national thing that applies to every state, and the individual states don't have the right to make that decision on their own? In this case, we are going back, like you said, we're going back to individual states making that decision. The question is it oppressive? Is it slavery? And that's the argument you're hearing amongst like women, media, Democrats, et cetera, people who are pro, is that this is enslaving women. So they're going to make the case that this is going back to allowing states to have slavery. So you hear the rhetoric, the narrative. Kamala Harris, it's going to affect interracial marriage. It's going to black women and their children. All this kind of case, the sense that this is an oppressive move. For those who support it, they're like, this is a liberating thing, right? This is a liberty. So there's an oppression-liberty
argument
conflict
here. Yes.
About whether or not the federal should apply to everyone or whether individuals should make decisions on their own. And so, yes, we are going back to prior to 1970 to a system of the states making decisions on their own. The question is this particular issue oppressive, enslaving, like slavery was for states like South Carolina that said, hey, states' rights. We should be able to, it's our state. We should be able to have slaves. We should be able to own slaves. Leave me alone. This is my state, the state's sovereignty. So here you are in 2022, 100 plus years later, it's the same struggle. Should the federal oversee all the states, or should the states on the particular issue be allowed to make decisions on their own?
So,
it's a great conversation. It's a fantastic debate that our culture should have.
So
without question.
On Roe versus Wade, on abortion, the court has now ruled that it's a state's issue. But they also ruled that something is not a state issue. It's a federal issue. Do you care to elaborate on that and maybe extrapolate the paradox so we can look at it?
It is definitely a paradox, what I'm about to describe. So Boston, there's city government buildings. They wanted to put up all these flags. There's several hundred different kinds of flags. There's a Black Lives Matter flag, Antifa flags, Pride flags, you name it. Just there's all kinds of flags. Even the Christian community has a flag. So they passed an ordinance that they were going to allow these flags except for the Christian flag. So this Christian group applied to have their flag, and when they rejected it, they sued and eventually made it to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, wait a second, if you're going to have all the flags, if you're going to have any flags, then you have to allow all the flags. And so they ruled that you have to allow the Christian flag to be put up as well as the Pride flag. So Boston decided, okay, well then instead of taking all the flags down, they put up the Christian flag right next to the Pride flag. Contrast that with Yakima City Council in Washington State. Yakima City Council voted not to put up any flags at all because they didn't want to be sued. So instead of putting up the Pride flag and the Christian flag together, they didn't put up any flags at all. So you have this contrast here. And this is the interesting part of this, is the abortion issue regarding the states having individual choices versus if it affects one, it applies to all doctrine. Is Boston, if you're going to put up the flags, you have to put up all the flags, whether you agree or disagree with their ideology. Same with Yakima. They decided not to put up any of the flags because they didn't want to face the liability. And so there's this struggle here of, do I let the states make their individual choices Or do we have the national government oversee the choice? And that's the beauty of the flag case. In Yakima, they just didn't put up the flags. In Boston, they put them all up. Same with the marriage license. If you're going to have marriage licenses, the Supreme Court said, hey, if you're going to issue a license, anybody who applies, you can't discriminate in their application. Okay, so if it applies to one, it applies to all. And in this case, state of Alabama may choose to not have abortions. California may choose to have abortions. Yakima City chose not to put up the pride or Christian flags. Boston is choosing to put up all the flags. And that is one of the beauties of our system, is that you can compete with your feet. right? You can choose that's the interesting quagmire of this struggle. Should it apply to all abortion, or should we put up all the flags, even though we disagree with Christianity or pride flags, or you know what I mean?
Right.
Should I move to Alabama because I don't support abortion, or should I move to California because I do? That's one of the beauties of our system of government in its original form. When you subtract the horrendous application of slavery to human beings, is this struggle that even they had in the 1800s, we're still having in the 21st century. Does it apply to all, or should we leave individuals to make choices for themselves?
Well, and then so if we look at these things, particularly, so we've got Roe versus Wade, we got the flag thing, and then you brought up marriage licenses as well, which of course is referring to whether or not there should be homosexual marriage, right? That's the big question. So
should there be flags? Should there be marriage? Should there be abortion? These are all facing us at the time, and the system of government is really the most incredible part of our discussion. What is the value of individuals making choices, and what is the value of it applying to everyone within the country?
Right. Well, and then so with our founding document, the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, which lays the groundwork for states to have their own constitutions, right? We've got this separation of powers, and then that's what's going through my head in terms of, okay, which way should these rulings go? Because if there's this clarity in separation of power, or this clarity in separation of powers, where okay, Article 1, Section 8 says Congress has the ability to do these things, and the Bill of Rights says, well, here's exactly where these powers are separated. Some are more exact, and some are more vague, which obviously is where these discussions.
This is the beautiful thing about this, Dylan, is that California has a state constitution, and so because their values in that state, they're arguing is we support abortion, they're going to change their state constitution. Mm-hmm. Okay, and that's the key here is our system allows. We have 50 states, and each one is a little bit different culture, different. You know what I mean? It comes back to this question: do you change the federal constitution or your state constitution? Right. So you could have a federal constitutional amendment for abortion, or you could change the Constitution of California for abortion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'm just kind of stunned. I'm shocked, but I'm not shocked that they want to work abortion into the Constitution in California.
Right. I mean, that is the beauty of the system that allows you to have that debate on your show. Because imagine if you weren't allowed to have that debate and say, I can't believe they're doing that. Or you're like, I'm excited they're doing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In this society, we're allowed to have both reactions. I'm excited to move to California because they're going to put abortion, or, oh my gosh, I'm leaving California and going to Alabama because they don't, you know what I mean? The compete with your feet doctrine is what I call it. It is the beauty of our system of government. We're allowed to have the debate, number one. Number two, you can compete with your feet. And number three, you have the ability to change the system. You can, if you want to make abortion the law of the land, you go to the Constitution of the U.S. Or if you can't do it at the federal, you can move to California and try to do it there. Does it make sense?
Or vice versa, right?
Or vice versa, move to Alabama.
No, I mean, if we want to put it in the Constitution that you can't do it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, well, and that's the key is regarding marriage, just to bring that back to, in California, the Constitution was changed in 2008, Article 1, Section 7.5. Marriage is only between a man and a woman. So it's in their Constitution. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I want to make sure we play it both ways. abortion and marriage. It's in the it's still there actually in the California Constitution. It's not been amended out of the Constitution. What happened is some people, a court in California said it's not mandatory. It's in the Constitution, but you don't have to enforce this. So that created this confusion within the 50 plus counties. So if you were,
I'm shocked, but not shocked that came from California.
Well, I mean, and that's the beauty of us being able to look at that and say, see what happened? That's what happened. If we didn't have the experience to be able to look at it and see, wow, that's.
And if we didn't have the different states, it would apply to everybody, and we're stuck with it.
And then you have no creativity. There's no debate. There's no creation. There's no innovation. There's no like, okay, how do we navigate this struggle? I mean, here we are, over 150 years later, and almost 170 years. Wow. And we're still struggling with this concept of, is it one size fits all? Or do you allow each individual component to make choices for themselves? We're still there. It's still a struggle. It's beautiful. Now, to me, it's beautiful. Some people, it's like oppressive as all get out. The constitutional amendment in 2008 about marriage got messed up, not because they put it in the Constitution. It's because of the marriage license itself, like the flags. The marriage license, they started saying, well, you're discriminating against us. You're issuing a license. You shouldn't discriminate against us. And it brings this policy point to the forefront, Dylan. Should we have marriage licenses in the first place?
Yeah, that is a pretty weird.
Right? Okay, because it created the opportunity for discrimination. And that's what the Supreme Court ruled. They didn't rule that you can't be married. You and I can't be married because we're males. That's not what they ruled. They ruled if you're going to issue a license in Washington state for marriage, you cannot discriminate in the application for that license. That's the rule.
Kind of like when you apply for a job. We're an equal opportunity employer. We do not discriminate against race, sex, or gender. Yes. It's like that.
So this brings up the point. It's like, okay, Christian community, you don't like gay marriage. Well, then why don't you start fighting to eliminate marriage licenses?
And this
totally take that problem out of the equation.
And this is why I love talking to Mark Herr from the Center for Self-Governance. Is when we look at the problem, there's the emotional reaction to the problem, right? Like, oh my God, the Supreme Court approved gay marriage, and it's like, okay, slow down. What did they actually do? And if you want to accomplish
what
X,
actually happened?
If you want to accomplish X, is what you're doing accomplishing X? Or is this other thing over here actually going to accomplish X? And we find out in most cases it's the thing over here.
It's the thing over here, like with the marriage. I mean, so this judge in the 4th district sends her federal marshals to go arrest Kim Davis from Kentucky because she's not enforcing the opinion of the Supreme Court. Like, whoa. I mean, and that's why Senator Ted Cruz flew to Kentucky, because it's like, that is a constitutional crisis. The judges are not law enforcers, and neither are the federal marshals. That's a systematic thing. So when they showed up in Kentucky to arrest this county clerk who refused to enforce the opinion of the Supreme Court, again, it's coming back to that struggle between the national and the state. Our system was designed to have that struggle, that tension in it, so that we could study these things. You and I could have this conversation about 1852 and 2008, and here we are in 2022. We're supposed to, as citizens, it's not supposed to be just utopia in the liberal world.
The system's set up, and you just vote once a year, and then it runs itself. It's not like that.
It's meant part of the experience and the journey is when we fail. We learn from our failures. And if we eliminate the opportunity to fail in our nation, we'll lose the opportunity to have these kinds of amazing discussions about, well, how do we navigate this challenge? It is a challenge. I have a student, I'm not going to say who she is, but she's a Democrat. She has members of her family that are gay. Some of them want to be married, that kind of stuff. Okay. And for me personally, that's just not my thing. But in terms of helping her navigate the struggle, because she's like, the media is saying this, Roe v. Wade is going to do that. Black women, and she's like, I'm really having a hard time, but after taking your class, I'm slowing down. She literally said this in the email. I'm slowing down to think through this, and that's why I'm reaching out to you. I really want to talk to you about how I navigate this challenge. And I told her exactly what I've told you. It's a federal and state thing. It's not a federal versus like they're enemies or something. No, it's a federal state system. Should it apply to all, or should each individual state have a choice? Number two, if it applies to one, should it apply to all, like the flags or marriage? Okay. And so she's navigating that challenge as a Democrat. Maybe I don't vote as a Democrat. Maybe I vote as a Republican. Maybe I'm not a Liz Cheney Republican. You know what I mean? There's all of those questions. But when it comes to the system, I don't care whether she's Democrat or not. She's my fellow citizen, and this is a systematic challenge that should become part of our discussion, not ran away from. It's not something we should avoid.
Well, and then that makes me
thank you for having me on for this.
Yeah, well, that makes me think of I think Thomas Jefferson. I might have it wrong, but I think Thomas Jefferson at some point suggested that the entire every 20 years the entire Constitution should get scrapped to prevent vested, to make it so vested interests can't get their hold in everything, and that was thrown out because if everything's up in the air for 20 years, then there's no predictability for anything. But I think the point that he was trying to get at is when we made this thing, we did our best, but we know it's not perfect, and there's details in here that are going to require maintenance. I love that term. They're going to require maintenance, and I think today we have this tendency to see the details of these original documents, of this original framework, as sacrosanct, as opposed to the method as sacrosanct. Right? Where it's like the founding fathers wanted exactly this thing. Well, it's like, well, why did they say that thing? And well, this one said this and this one said that, and whatever they said, okay, let's build a system that the people could change it if they need to.
Living, and the accusation is living in the past. And what is the past? It's full of white males who own slaves. Okay, and so we should reject the system they created as a result of their failures. Well, what about the positives in the system? So practically, let's use a practical analogy here. The Nazis are responsible for essentially creating the airplane's jet engine. Mm-hmm. All across this country today, there's jets flying everywhere, and probably people who don't agree with slavery and Nazis. You know what I mean? Yeah. But do they support Nazism because they're flying on a plane with jet engines that were created by Nazis? It's illogical. The system has value, even though the evil people created it. You know what I'm saying? The Nazis, I mean, I've been reading some books and stuff about it. It's just like awful what was done to human beings in the name of their worldview. Right. But they created a system called a jet engine that we use in our everyday lives now, pretty much, to travel, to get places faster, to move cargo. Anyway, my point is that because Nazis created the jet engines doesn't mean we should scrap the jet engine. Right? I agree. Just because white founders created the United States system of government and they owned slaves and did those things doesn't mean we should scrap the good things that came with the system of government that they created, is my argument. And there are some fantastic things. And one of those is this federal state struggle that we're talking about with abortion, with flags, with marriage, et cetera. Well, and then with this federal state struggle, when I first took your Block 1 class, I learned about the 7-layer boundary republic. 7 boundary layer, whatever, I get those two mixed up. That we have some unique properties in this country that are more than just like we have the freedom of speech and then the Second Amendment and stuff like that. And I never realized that because when I was learning about governments across the world, you see like this post World War II copies of the American system going everywhere, right? And after I took your class, I'm like, they don't seem so much like copies anymore. They kind of seem like pseudo-copies, where they look like they would be that way, but when you get down to the details, they're not. And one of the biggest details is, freedom of speech and Second Amendment, that's definitely a big thing. But
there's this the what you're talking about, this tension between the state and the federal government that doesn't happen anywhere else, and your ability to move with your feet.
Not like the United States. There's
Right.
nothing like there are some countries like Germany that are modeled after like technical terms, monarchies, republic stuff.
Let me talk about
ours,
Germany, right? Because me and Nima, it's our show, we talk about this sometime. Nima's from Germany, and he brought up this exact question, and he said, well, living in Germany, there's way more power for the federal government to say, yeah, this applies to all. This applies to all. All the police are all connected to the federal government. Like, yeah, you have these
nationalized
states.
Police force.
Yeah,
right.
You have these states, but it's like for the federal government, the states can't do this in Germany to the federal government like they can here.
And that's the beauty of our system, the compete with your feet, the tension between the federal and the state, and then the not so obvious component, which is if you learn the system, if your audience is willing to learn the system, they can not only compete with their feet, they can also fix or modify the system. Like in California, the people of California are going to vote on whether to make abortion a constitutional thing in November.
Mm-hmm.
So it's on their ballot. So again, you can compete with your feet. You can also work to modify and change the system. I wanted to go back to one thing you said earlier about Jefferson and the 20-year thing. So in the United States, there is something called the charter form of government for local governments. So counties and cities can be charter forms of government. And what that means is every 10 years, they can change their form of government. So Jefferson's ideas were not 100% rejected. It's just not at the federal level. It's at the local level. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, in San Luis Obispo, California, the Republican-controlled county, which did not like their Democrat governor Newsom, who could replace or could fill empty seats, they didn't like that.
Fill empty seats in like the county commission?
County.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the governor of the state of California appoints empty seats for county commissioners, right? And that's in their constitution. It's part of their process. Okay.
In the state constitution or in the county charter? Okay.
They don't have a county charter. They're not a charter form of government in their county. They're a different form of government. My point is what you said about Jefferson and changing the form of government every 20 years. When you say change the Constitution, you're changing the form of government. Mm-hmm. Okay. It exists in the United States. It's there. It's built in. You can, if you want to change your form of government in Washington State, for example, you can have this form of county government or that form of county government. And in this case, in San Luis Obispo, the Republicans didn't want Newsom, a Democrat who they didn't like, filling their empty seats. And so the elected officials were going to change the car. They're gonna replace the Honda with a Toyota. They wanted to get rid of their county form of government and create a new form of county government. So Newsom, the Democrat who they hated, could not appoint their seats.
How could they do that if it was built into the state constitution, though?
Because they're different forms of government. That's my point. And if you accept the charter form of government, every 10 years, your community could form a constitutional convention to change your local form of government every 10 years, going back to your Jefferson point.
Right.
Well, I had Democrat moms in my class in San Luis Obispo, and of course, issues, gay, gun, flags, you know what I mean? That's all they could think about. But once I was able to help them understand the system, they were able to communicate with these Republican county commissioners, not as Republican and Democrat.
Right.
And they convinced them to drop their effort to change the charter merely because they didn't like Gavin Newsom. Profound. That's a profound.
I mean, that is huge because, like you said, Democrat, Republican, issue this, issue that. Stepping back from that for a second, do you want a situation where just because this particular governor is not liked,
right? Whether
you're just gonna throw the whole thing out?
change the system. And that's the important part of a Center for Self-Governance in our training is when you learn systematic politics, what you're learning is not how to set aside your partisan differences, how to navigate your partisan differences and compare it to the airplane you're flying. Do we want to scrap this airplane because we don't agree on whether you're on the left or the right side of the plane?
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to crash the plane for that? And that's the part we bring to the table for the American culture is not giving up your partisan beliefs, but learning how to navigate those beliefs and have a conversation with your fellow citizens. Are we trying to scrap the plane too? And I want to give you one more example.
Yeah.
So Republican city councilman in the state of Washington was able to convince 4 Marxist Democrats, and I don't mean blue dog kind of Democrats that might be conservative in some things. I'm talking, these are far left Marxist Democrats, and he's a far right Republican.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they don't see eye to eye on anything, but he was able to, with systematic politics, to convince them not to put up any of the flags.
This was Yakima?
Christian. This is Yakima City Council, yeah.
That's wild.
So I'm just so you can see the potential. All I'm saying is there's a potential. Now, what's happened is the guys that I call Mr. Miriam's Marble Cake Factory people, they immediately went into action and convinced those city council to reverse their decision. Okay, so now that struggle is continuing. But the point is, I'm able to prove that there's a proof of concept.
Right. Where
Democrat mom.
Yeah. Sorry. I guess I'm just trying to fill your. Put words into your mouth, but I'm excited about this because you got the one Republican who should be voted out left, right, and center against these 4 Marxist Democrats, influencing the 4 Marxist Democrats to do his way.
Well, and what his way was the system.
Yes.
Not the Republican. This is the important piece is how to navigate the distinction between I'm pushing you towards my partisan belief system.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm pushing you towards, are we keeping or trashing the system? Does it make sense?
Yes.
And in California, they were going to change the system. The Republicans were going to change the system because they hated their Democrat governor. And the system allows him to choose their empty seats. So they were going to go with this new form of government called charter. And within our training program, we're like, what are the pros and cons of a charter form of government? And these Democrat moms were like, no way, man. We don't want that. We don't want that form of government. And so they were able to navigate their partisan differences and have a conversation about the system. Same thing happened with the flags in Yakima City Council with the Republican guy and the far left Democrats. They don't see eye to eye. He was able to systematically convince them, hey, we're going to get sued. And if we don't put up all the flags, we'll get sued. So either we put up all the flags or let's not put up all the flags. And they voted not to put up all the flags. And then the Mr. Miriam's Marble Cake Factory people outside, they were like, whoa, 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 whoa. And they immediately got their machinery into action and are getting them in the process of going back.
You may have to explain Mr. Miriam's Marble Cake Factory to everybody who is hearing that for the first time.
So,
rabbit hole, I know.
Yeah, our organization, we teach systematic politics, which simply means using words with strategy to gain control of either more or less boundaries. Period.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, using words with strategies to gain control of more or less boundaries. Okay, so this guy named Charles Miriam, he figured out how to exploit your human nature, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican.
And just to put him on the map here, this is a guy who was advisor to 5 different presidents, FDR, 4 different. Excuse me. Yeah.
Plus or minus one.
Yeah, not as big of a dude. Okay, he's nobody now. He only did 4.
That's right. Only 4.
Yeah, and 4. FDR was one of them. And this is also the guy. Nima was looking this up on one of our previous shows. Who I guess he invented behavioralism, or he designed the psychological subsection of behavioralism. So, please
He's the
tell us
inventor.
more.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Mr. Merriam basically believed that our federal state struggle system, what we've been talking about for the last so many minutes, he believed that system was outdated and antiquated because it couldn't keep up with the changes in economy, social, and population things. And so he began to, in the early 1900s, come up with a way to change the system without firing a shot, without a revolution. Okay. And so his inventions, like behavioralism and others, are the major components of this shift in our system of government. So pitting Democrats and Republicans against each other is part of his behavioralism approach. What will move Democrats? What will move Republicans to collapse the old system? Even if it means killing Republicans, demonizing Republicans, and allowing Democrats to bully Supreme Court justices and burn down America.
He doesn't care about any of that, right? Because it's accomplishing his goal.
The ends justify the means. And so the means to get there is what I call Mr. Merriam's marble cake factory. The marble cake, when you slice it open, everything's jumbled together and it's all confusing. Kind of like these conversations are complex, and your audience is like, dude, just say something funny, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Give me I need a TikTok video. Whew, right? Can I get 140 characters, please?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. The behavior of human nature, the basic instinct Merriam studied, he created a process in order to isolate the two sides. He also created a process to nurture the governing, your elected officials like Liz Cheney and Nancy Pelosi, Republican and Democrat, so that they'll be joined at the hip to each other. And then at the base level, our level, we'll all be divided and fighting each other and hating each other, and we can't talk to each other.
And this is all him. But like there's a straight line that goes back to him on this.
Charles Merriam's the man on this. He's the architect. I call him the architect for converting the United States from our original system that you brought up earlier, the one that people say is racist and right. South Carolina, and, to a new system, which is the federal government becomes nationalized. You have nationalized police forces, like Nima was describing. The states really can't. There is no tension there. You get rid of the tension. You eliminate the separation of powers. Merriam came up with all of that, and I simply call it Mr. Merriam's Marble Cake Factory.
And side note here, Charles Merriam was, I think we could say, religiously motivated from Plato's Republic, which I haven't read the book. You've read the book. You read part of the book out to us during the first class.
I get to see him as a kid playing with Plato, right?
Yeah.
No. So there's this book called Plato's Republic, written 2,400 years ago. Essentially, there's no parents in Plato's Republic. Everybody who is not the philosopher king making the rules is equal. So animals, nature, artificial intelligence, you and me, we would all be on an equal playing field. And so Charles Merriam was his religion, if you will, was not like a conventional, there's a God or something. He's more secular and philosophical. That Plato's Republic was very pure, very simple. It's aristocratic, ruled by a few elites. And that there's no parents. You get rid of people who don't produce, like old people. You just put them in nursing homes with COVID patients in New York and let them die. He believed in eugenics, essentially. He believed in the noble lie, which it's okay to lie to selfish people because they're just in it for themselves, and I'm in it for the greater good. So my rules are better than your rules. And then the city-state, he believed in the city, like Seattle, being the center of all control, rather than the east side of the rural Washington. You're just a bunch of selfish property owners. And then he believed in the guardian class, these people who define selflessness and selfishness through identifying hero, victims, and villains. And then the philosopher kings, these are the ones that are considered by the guardians to be the truly selfless, and they are the ones that get to make the rules. Kind of like Bill Gates. He doesn't have a degree in immunization or anything. You know what I mean? But when he talks about vaccines and he talks about, the future and all this stuff, I mean, he's just given a higher status than your elected official. And the reason for that is this belief system Miriam had in Plato's Republic. Anyway,
I do want to comment on that because not that I'm sure that Charles Merriam wouldn't have a really good answer against this, but if our American system is old and antiquated, why is a 2,400-year-old not even more older and antiquated? And I mean, if you read the Republic, which I have, it's absolutely terrifying what the guy suggests. I mean, like you said with the no parents. Specifically, what you mean by that is that there's no marriage, so sexual intercourse is had
no family, there's no moms,
haphazardly,
no dad.
And then when the child's born, you don't know who the father is, and then you take it away from the mother, so the mother doesn't know who or so the child doesn't know who the mother is, and then the community raises it in general, which is exactly what we're seeing done or pushed for today. And this idea, okay, we have the philosopher kings, and they're the ones that get to tell everybody else what to do, and they don't have any rights. They just are they're equal to trees, they're equal to artificial intelligence, they're equal to. I mean, I'm seeing articles now that man loses lawsuit against monkey, man loses lawsuit against dog, man loses lawsuit against elephant, so, stuff like that. It's completely crazily terrifying. And personally, the only way I can understand it is taking the same language that this guy used, selfish and selfless, and it's the other way around. Like, you're a complete megalomaniac, selfish dude that wants to rule everything. Right? I mean, that's the only way maybe I'm just emotionally reacting, and Charles Merriam could have predicted this with his behavioralism, but.
Totally.
It's completely insane. This idea of like, let's recreate Plato's Republic in the modern. It's just totally nuts. And there's a lot of some powerful people who are working very hard to make sure that happens still today, right?
They are. Because they're true believers. Like let's say somebody who's Muslim, they're going to believe in the Quran and Muhammad and Allah, right? And then there's Mormons. They're going to believe in the prophet and the 9th degree of celestial glory. You know what I mean? It's going to guide their decision-making on a daily basis. Plato's Republic is a religion to some people, and it may not include a God or Allah as we conventionally understand it, but in their world, Plato's Republic is a logical kingdom, and it's something for them to pursue. And so they study human nature in order to exploit it. So Merriam created the Social Science Research Council in 1923. This is the 100th year anniversary of it. And it's the place that houses his behavioralism studies and beyond. I mean, it's more than that, but they don't just study their enemy. No, they study all groups, all demographics, kind of like rats in a maze. Mm-hmm. Blue rats versus the red rats. Okay. Right. The
black versus white rats. Yeah. Who cares?
Yes. Yeah. The old rats versus the young rats. Okay. And then to move them in the direction of what they're trying to achieve, their scientific study, they exploit the human nature. So the Democrat population is going to have a reaction to abortion, and the Republican is going to have a reaction to abortion. And both are exploited.
Well, and then let's look at that specifically, because we're seeing those reactions everywhere, right? So the left is jumping up and down, screaming. They're pounded on state capitals. It's not insurrection this time for whatever reason, and they're
bullying Supreme Court justices.
Bullying Supreme Court justices, trying to assassinate a Supreme Court justice, right? And then
there's even a purge thing now. Like it's kind of a game. Assassination game. Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Well, and then the right comes out and says, hey, we won, this is wonderful, thank God Jesus, and look how crazy these guys are, and I'm going to stand here and put a camera in your face just to show everybody how nuts you are, and we'll clash in the street, right?
And in the meantime,
That's all been predicted. That's all been predicted. Yes.
The human nature is easy to foresee when you step back from the emotion of the issues that are your worldview and look at this from a systematic perspective. It's easy to see how Miriam is able to exploit human nature on issues like abortion or whatever. And the end game is they have a way to nurture the elected and the employees of government into a cohesive unit. It's called cooperative federalism. And then for the base, the Republicans and Democrats, they divide them on the word white supremacy. Okay. Christians are white supremacists. Patriots are white supremacists. Anti-government are white supremacists.
Gun owners are white supremacists. Free speech is white supremacy. Yes.
There you go. And so then everyone over here is a victim. Everyone over here is an oppressor. But it's not in this level up here. It's Liz Cheney and Nancy Pelosi, Republican Democrats. They're one together.
They're holding hands.
On our level,
yep.
They'll say, well, that's a rhino. That's a rhino. No, it's
a Platoist. Yeah.
It's their human nature being exploited. And how do we navigate the exploitation of our human nature? That's why we call ourselves the Center for
Self-Governance.
Self-governance, governing myself first before trying to govern you.
Well, and then to that point, I want to elaborate on, removing your emotion from the issue, because I mean, let's take Roe versus Wade. I have strong emotions over it, and I am very happy that it got overturned. And that being the case for this conversation that we're having, because I mean, we've been talking in this these neutral terms, like, okay, maybe you're for it, maybe you're against it, blah blah. I want to let you know I don't have that neutral opinion.
I was for it. Yeah.
I don't have that neutral opinion. However, when it comes to the systematic politics, whatever the issue is, even in an issue like that, if you want to not be predicted by behavioralists, you have to step back.
Exploit it.
Yeah. You have to be able to step back.
Because the average human being, this is where Miriam fails, in my opinion, is that he failed to calculate that most people, once they realize they're being manipulated, that is extremely offensive to human nature.
Yes.
To human nature. When you like if you think about someone who they're in a relationship and then one of them is cheating, it's offensive when they find out all the facts 20, 30 years later. It's like it's damaging to them somehow psychologically. Right. And there's like
I think I could explain that, and I think I can maybe explain why the behavioralists would miss that. Is human beings have free will. If we're being manipulated, that's removing free will, and there's a tendency, I would say part of human nature, to want to be able to express that free will, and that a behavioralist, by definition, sees humans as not having free will. I mean, they don't even. It doesn't even occur to them that they might that they would say, "Oh, hey, someone's controlling me, and I don't like it." Well, you don't have free will, so why does it matter?
Superior and inferior. So what I've been doing is, just to help, hopefully, to balance the playing field, to equalize the playing field for your audience, is I'm starting. So they control a lot of the lexicon, and that just means a lot of the words, like positive and negative words, like sustainability, smart, green, stakeholder, right?
White.
And then negative words, white, all these negative, positive words. So white supremacist, sexual supremacist, or religious supremacist.
Yeah.
What I've been starting to do in order to help identify these people that think and feel this way, that kind of like see themselves above us, and they're like the scientists looking down on the rat maze, metaphorically speaking, I've started to refer to that class of people as aristocratic supremacists.
Sounds accurate.
And so my organization, we put out a statement all the time. We're dealing with this now with Southern Poverty Law Center and Amazon Smile, since we're a nonprofit. We recently received a letter or a notification from Amazon Smile that Southern Poverty Law Center has said that our organization, that we support hate and we support terrorism. And I'm like, no, we don't. We don't teach suicide bombers. We don't go around killing people. So what we did was in 2019, in preparation for this, and this is what I meant by we can separate ourselves and be ahead of these things. Is in 2019 we put out a press release because we knew
that this was coming.
We know their human nature. There's this meme and these scientists, and they're looking at the rats, and they're like, apparently they've been studying us, and while they were studying us, their study got published. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So our little rat organization has been studying the aristocratic supremacists. We haven't been studying how to become a better partisan. We've been trying to understand the aristocratic supremacist and their human nature, because the way they do it is their human nature doesn't need to be studied. They're above it. And I'm like, what I've learned from Center for Self-Governance in this 13-year journey is they are not above their human nature. And they are easily, like anyone else, able to, like Hitler, to justify their belief system and murder lots and lots of people. But they don't see it as any different. They see themselves as above it. And they're like, we're not Hitler. We're not white supremacist. We're not fascist. You are. I'm like, wait a second. You're an aristocratic supremacist capable of having the same fruit as fascist
or
white supremacist,
or whatever,
Hitler, right? Yeah. So this is the important piece of learning how to navigate these things, realizing that partisan politics it could be an exploitation of your human nature, number one. Number two is if there is a class of people that kind of see themselves above that fray, it's important for your audience to understand, at least from our perspective in Center for Self-Governance, is that they do not acknowledge their own human nature. They don't see it
like
as
a true narcissist.
Okay, so understand again, when you understand their human nature, when we realized what Southern Poverty Law Center was doing back in 2018, 2019, we joined Amazon Smile. And because we're a nonprofit.
What is Amazon Smile? I've never heard of Amazon Smile.
So Amazon, you go and you buy stuff. Amazon Smile is you can select charities, and when you buy stuff, Amazon will give a portion of the proceeds to your charity.
Oh, okay.
So we joined as a nonprofit.
So you could receive funds as a charity from Amazon Smile, and then the Southern Poverty Law Center doesn't want you getting any money, and they say, okay, it's a hate group, to try to get the money taken away from you. Got it. Okay. And so what did you do?
Yeah. So what we did was we joined on purpose, knowing that SPLC was sitting on their board and that they're the only entity that has a veto. And we knew that at some point in the future that they were going to target our organization for hate, because we don't advance their far left Democrat things. We don't advocate far right things and far left things. We report and demonstrate due process. For example, the January 6 people have been in jail longer for threatening and coercing Congress than anyone who has threatened or coerced Supreme Court justices with assassination. No one has been arrested.
Well, and that wasn't even a threat. Well, and for Kavanaugh, it wasn't even a threat. It was an attempt.
Right. And so there you go. Yeah, that's my point is that's why we report on it, not because we support far right extremist domestic terrorism. Mm-hmm. We don't support far left domestic terrorism either. And that's the beauty of what we're accomplishing with Center for Self-Governance is once you are able to see, okay, listen, I'm for or against the Roe v. Wade overturn thing, like the young lady who reached out to me.
Yeah.
She's against it, but she's trying to navigate through the systematic side of it. And that's important, piece of our culture is learning. There's not only two sides to the story, there's also two approaches.
And sorry, finish and then I'll ask my question.
And in this case, the approach is related to the system, the federal and the state conflict, if you will, the tension. Mm-hmm. And then if it applies to one, does it apply to all? Those are two standards that we can apply at the layman's level. Do we want to transfer the struggle to nation? Do we want to transfer it to individuals? And if it applies to one, should it apply to all? And can we have that conversation? Can we compete with our feet? Can we learn the system? And can we have civil conversations like we are now? I mean, to me, it's a fantastic, beautiful thing to take into the 21st century.
Absolutely. I still want to know what happened with you in the SPLC. So
it's ongoing.
Okay, but I mean, tell me more about what. So you knew the SPLC was going to do this. If you joined Amazon Smile, and you joined Amazon Smile, knowing like, okay, we're pushing the.
There's a potential that SPLC SPLC would cancel us.
So, why did you want that, and what's your goal?
Well, first of all, it's in order to bring out this conversation that we're having now is that our human nature is being exploited, and they're trying to cancel people without having civil conversations. They're going down the same rabbit hole of communism and fascist, et cetera,
right?
Whether they admit it or not. The second is that due process matters to everyone, whether you're Democrat or Republican. Like for the January 6ers, they're still in jail for bullying Congress. And you might be a Democrat and you might be like, well, they deserve it.
Well, okay? Charge them. Like, use the process then. Yeah.
Does it equally apply to bullying Supreme Court justices for issues that you're passionate about?
Right.
Or is it a one? Again, it goes back to the federal state conflict. And if it applies to one, does it apply to all? I'm saying it applies to, it's so beautiful. It applies to every single, and I can take the partisan debate completely out of the equation and still navigate whether I'm for or against it personally. Mm-hmm. The issue, abortion, I have my personal beliefs, but notice I haven't once come out and been like, I'm for or against. What I've stuck to is this one principle, and that is the systematic politics is also an approach. And we literally with SPLC, I am with them. I hate, like this is, I agree. White supremacy is an abomination to the human, and so is Black supremacy. So is Arabic supremacy. So is Hispanic supremacy. So is rainbow supremacy. So is aristocratic supremacy, religious supremacy, sexual supremacy. What I'm waiting for is when SPLC agrees with us that we reject all forms of supremacy. And that's going to be the deciding line for SPLC. Our objective is to say they don't actually reject white supremacy. They're trying to collapse the United States of America.
Right, and the white supremacy
is just a bias.
It's just a story. Yeah.
And they're using business and government as a weapon. I was born in England, raised in Korea. My stepmother was Korean. I want to talk about a racist nation.
Yeah, growing up in a country,
growing up in a country where Koreans would call me bastard because I had a Korean stepmother because they were absolutely against whites and Koreans marrying together.
Yeah.
So you can't say that white supremacy only exists in America. No. I experienced Asian supremacy to the hardcore. Mm-hmm. I mean, to the utmost. So can I empathize with Blacks who were subjected to the most god-awful treatment as human beings, separate water fountains, separate seats in a bus? Can I empathize? Yes. And to say that I can't is SPLC is now labeling me, not because I'm a human, but because of the color of my skin.
Right.
Which in fact makes them racist themselves. And again, I'm not trying to be critical or condemning of SPLC. We did this because our organization teaches systematic politics and we teach people how to apply it. And our organization did. Right. So you're
not doing this because you're mad at the SPLC. You're doing this because this is a perfect opportunity to apply systematic politics.
You know how many people have been labeled by SPLC that are not white supremacists?
Yeah, I know. I'm familiar with the phenomenon.
Right. And so, yeah. So this whole notion that America is a white nation full of white supremacists is not, they're not being honest about the debate. They're taking the system they hate and labeling the system evil by the people that created it our organization argues there are parts of our system, like the jet engine, we should keep.
Mm-hmm.
And if you eliminate those, which is how we're able to articulate that to our students, like with this young Democrat lady that I'm actually going to be calling her when I'm done, is, hey, there's a federal state struggle for a reason. If it fits to one, it should apply to all. And that paradox is something we have to navigate as human beings. And welcome to that struggle. And we're here, literally, organization is here to help you navigate that struggle. And I'm so grateful that she trusts us, and because I'm not going to try to indoctrinate her with my partisan belief on Roe v. Wade or the flags. It's like the system is there to protect you too, and to protect me. But SPLC was willing to weaponize it. And if they're willing to weaponize it against you, I guarantee you, and I won't say her name, but I'll call her Sally, okay? Sally, they'd be willing to weaponize it against you too.
Absolutely.
So from human to human, I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican. Our organization literally does not matter. What matters is that struggle between the federal and the state. If it applies to one, should it apply to all struggle? And how do we navigate that? And we've done that for this last hour. So I'm really thankful for the opportunity, Dylan.
Well, where do people go to get your training?
So if they're interested in learning systematic politics and the structure of government, they can go to centerforselfgovernance.com. All of our training series are there, all the available classes. We teach it online or in person. It's just a matter of determining what's best for your community, days and times.
And anywhere in the country. Anywhere in the country. And
doesn't matter.
I want to emphasize this. When you click on the schedule and you see the list there, that's not the only options. You can call them and say, I want to be on that list. Right?
Yeah.
Don't look in the list and go, oh, they're not coming to my area. I don't know what to do. Call them and they'll come, and then that will get put on the list.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've, like I said, San Luis Obispo, Democrat moms, Yakima County, Republican people. I've been to Sacramento for libertarians. I've been to Arizona for the Constitution Party. I mean, for us, it literally doesn't matter. If you're a human being and you want to be a part of this human journey of figuring out how we deal with this struggle, this tension, our organization is here for you 100% without question.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Mark, for taking the time to come on the show today. Mark from the Center for Self-Governance, centerforselfgovernance.com. And this has been Dylan Moore with IRETA TV, which you can find at ireta.tv. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.